Solo Leveling by Gong. Chapter 73 Lure. The 130,000 elite shadow soldiers revived by the Shadow Monarch had hidden inside the human shadow, obscuring their presence as much as possible. It was a trap. Face to face with the Shadow Army, the Iron Body Monarch felt disoriented, as if he had been plunged into an abyss. I've been had. The army he was leading on the Western Front wasn't good enough to go against the Shadow Army, and with Bellion and Igris leading it, the Iron Body Monarch himself was in peril. This was probably what the Shadow Monarch had been aiming for. I must let the others know. He urgently tried to contact the Dragon King, but found some kind of external force interfering with his communication. Could it be? Was this the Shadow Monarch's doing as well? The Monarch quickly scanned the army to locate the source of the interference and discovered a high orc shaman standing next to Igris, clutching some type of talisman while chanting. Fawn, now a general rank soldier after being reborn as a true shadow soldier, was blocking the Monarch's telepathy, aided by the Sphere of Avarice. Fong's cheeks flushed in embarrassment when he made eye contact with the king he used to serve, but he couldn't stop a smirk as he continued his incantation. The seemingly mocking grin enraged the king of monstrous humanoids. How dare you! This was not how the Shadow Monarch operated, let alone his army. The Shadow Army had always stoutly confronted their enemies and announced their impending doom. All this sneaking around, it's because of the human. The current Shadow Monarch was tainting the war with his humanity. Where was his pride as a monarch? The furious Iron Body Monarch enlarged his muscles until they seemed close to exploding, veins bulging out. He howled, "He is not worthy of being a monarch!" He appeared in a flash in front of Fawn, but Baru blocked his path. Bam! Baru locked hands with the Monarch, each straining to overtake the other. The Ant King glared at the king of monstrous humanoids and hissed, "Take back those words! You shall not get away with insulting my liege!" However, the Iron Body Monarch applied enough pressure to twist Baru's arms as he bellowed, "How dare a mere soldier get in a monarch's way?" Scraw! Baru let out an ear-piercing screech as his body doubled in size. The Dragon King had watched the soldiers of the world of chaos being decimated due to his hesitation, as well as the growing numbers of the Shadow Army. So when he stepped out of the gate, his eyes were ablaze with fury. They locked straight onto Jin Wu, the very center of the storm swallowing up the armies of chaos. The Dragon King was out for Jin Wu's blood. He didn't bother changing out of his human form as he spewed his breath of destruction. Wah! Jin Wu, who had been busy dealing with the magic beasts, caught sight of the bright flash just in time. It's him! Jin Wu leaped out of the way, leaving behind the soldiers of both armies to be engulfed by the Dragon King's breath and disintegrate into nothing. Bwaiawa! Jin Wu landed nearby. The Dragon King stopped his attack and regarded the human as numerous gates spawned behind him, from which various dragons and dragon folk emerged. They made up the main unit of the army led by the Dragon King, the Monarch of Destruction. Their forces, which could destroy the whole world in just a day, had assembled in its entirety to take down the Shadow Monarch. Jin Wu swallowed hard as he sensed the immense and limitless power emanating from the Dragon King. At his command, the Shadow soldiers abruptly fell back, standing behind Jin Wu to mirror the army of destruction. The Dragon King sneered, "Is this your entire army?" Jin Wu had managed to hurriedly recruit about a few thousand soldiers for his Shadow Army. On the other hand, there were almost 1,000,000 foot soldiers, hundreds of dragons, and the Dragon King himself on the opposing side. Naturally, Jin Wu was also acutely aware of the difference between the two armies, which was why he'd chosen this tactic. Charge! Jinwu let his army loose once more. The Dragon King was in disbelief. Is he still insisting on going head-to-head, despite the size of my army? The human was clearly out of his mind. Yet there the shadow soldiers were, colliding with the army of destruction. The dragons blew powerful flames toward them. Whoosh! Strangely, the shadow soldiers struck by the fire disappeared like dust instead of regenerating. The Dragon King realized immediately that they were meant only to buy some time. Where is? He expanded his perception and located the Shadow Monarch running away somewhere using his own shadow. The Dragon King chuckled at the pathetic attempt. Jinwu was presumably trying to utilize a hit-and-run strategy to hack away at the soldiers of the world of chaos. But that plan had a huge flaw. There was nothing stopping the Dragon King from chasing after him. He tracked the connection of Jinwu's shadow to the battlefield in the west. Over there, Jinwu would never be able to escape his clutches. The Dragon King jumped through a gate that would take him to the western front. On the other side, 130,000 shadow soldiers awaited him. But that wasn't all. Jinwu himself had been lying in wait. Arise! The army of chaos that had been annihilated by the real Shadow Army before Jinwu's arrival rose to join their ranks. The Dragon King observed the shadow soldiers now numbering close to 200,000. Is this what you were aiming for? Jinwu had lured him to this particular battlefield in a bid for the outnumbered Shadow Army to gain the upper hand. The Dragon King scoffed. How pathetic! He finally understood the Shadow Monarch's intentions. Though it had cost them the Western Front, it was a small price to pay for Jinwu's head. I would gladly give up half my army if it meant toppling him. Fear was born of uncertainty, but the Shadow Monarch's plans had now been brought to light. My fellow monarch! The Dragon King's lips curled into a smile. You probably thought that I alone would chase after you, but alas. Jinwu couldn't be more wrong. The most powerful mage among the monarchs stood on the Dragon King's side. The Transfiguration Monarch, who had been waiting for this very moment, generated innumerable gates to connect the opposite ends of the battlefield, allowing countless soldiers of the world of chaos to join them. Fight against the Shadow Army. Checkmate. Jinwu's plan was completely dashed, and his misstep would lead to his demise. The smug Dragon King taunted him. You've lost. However, for a brief moment, Jinwu seemed to return the smile. Got you. Everything had gone just as the Shadow Monarch had anticipated. The Dragon King caught the change in expression. You laugh? In the next instant, the Shadow soldiers sank into their commander's shadow as he recalled them. What in the world was going through his head? Doing so was practically suicide at this point. He wouldn't be able to run either, without his soldiers to buy him time. Even if he didn't want to lose soldiers, leaving his back wide open was surely a foolhardy move. Before Jinwu could do anything else, the Dragon King and the army of chaos advanced. Hundreds of thousands of soldiers flooded through the gates and rushed straight for the Shadow Monarch. Just as the Dragon King closed in on him and stretched out an arm, Jinwu's pupils transformed into those of a dragon. The Dragon King finally realized that something was very, very wrong. You? Time seemed to slow for a second. A mighty roar that made any being weaker than him fall into crippling despair burst out from the depths of Jinwu's soul. Rohair! It was Dragon's Fear, the skill Jinwu had acquired from Kamish Rune Stone, and one of the most lethal abilities dragons could use. Initially, Jinwu couldn't be bothered with it, since the skill didn't discriminate between friend or foe. But the circumstances have changed. The skill that was used by Kamish to cast hundreds of the best hunters into hell was now being used on the dragons themselves. Ah! Since Dragon's fear was boosted by the Shadow Monarch's endless mana, the Dragon King was the only one immune to the skill. After immobilizing his other foes, Jinwu grabbed the Dragon King's arm. "You impudent!" The Dragon King scowled. Jinwu grinned and tightened his grip. "You're coming with me!"